Hello. What a story, huh? This is, okay. Feeling pinched. All right. It's the end of their day. And the fishermen are cleaning their nets. It's the worst part of the day. They haven't caught anything. And then they still have to clean their nets. They still have to do the mind-numbing work of making sure there's no tears, cleaning out the seaweed from them. This is actually a lot of the work that goes into this type of fishing. There's a woman in our church who's has family and they're fishermen in Italy, and can attest to the amount of time it takes to just mend these nets. And so Jesus is teaching, and there's these fishermen up on shore and with empty boats. And he starts teaching, and the crowd gets too big, so he goes out onto the water. And this is that like amphitheater move. You know, have you ever like shouted across to another boat on the water, and how easily the sound carries over the water? Yeah, this is what he's doing. He's like, I got to get out here so everybody can see. And these guys are still in the boat, and he's like, hey, get me out here so these people can hear me. And so he teaches his lesson. The lesson apparently wasn't important enough for us to know about it, but he teaches a lesson to the people, and then he talks to the two brothers in the boat. It's Simon and it's his brother Andrew. And then they have friends James and John, who are just a little bit away. And Jesus is teaching, and people are kind of milling about, and then he speaks to them, and the crowd is watching, and he speaks to them, and he's like, hey, you guys should put your nets over on this side. It's like, you're the worst. He's like, we've been fishing all day. Like we haven't caught anything. Like we were already done with our day, and then you made us go out here, and we're done. And if I were Peter, like if I'm being honest, and I'm the pro, I'm the fisherman, and Jesus is not the pro, he's the carpenter, right? Stay in your lane. Like that's we'll call you when we need to build a house. You let me do the fishing, right? He's like, put your nets over there. He's like, well, come on, we already tried that, right? He's like, no, just don't try that side, try this side. So they throw their nets in the water on the other side, and you know the story because you hopefully listened to what Sean said. And they get this large gathering of fish. Like it's so big, it's breaking the nets they were trying to mend. Right? And like first this guy makes us stop mending our nets, and we have to go out here, now we have to do more fishing. It's embarrassing. But now they have such a haul of fish that they can hardly bring it in. And like, these nets are going to break. What's going on? So then they have to call their friends over. Like, guys, you guys need to come and help us with this load of fish. It's going to break our nets. It's going to sink our boat. This catching of fish immediately involves more people. And the boats come in. And they're heavy and they're full and they're barely afloat. And I'm sure Simon and his brother were like, this is going to pay some bills. Like we had 0 and now we have more than we can count. In our text for Luke, this appears like the first time Jesus runs into Simon, but it isn't. There's 2 interactions with Simon that I want to pay attention to. The first one is, so Simon and his brother Andrew were disciples of John the Baptist. Remember that guy? So then, this is like, I love the way that this story is written in John. They're like, Jesus is walking by, and John's like, hey, the Lamb of God. And they're like, what? And Andrew, his brother, Simon's brother, is with him, and he meets Jesus. And John's like, this is the guy. This is the Messiah. Start following this guy. So Andrew, good brother, goes home and gets his brother Simon. Okay, we know him as Peter, but right now he's Simon. And he brings Simon to Jesus, and he's like, hey, bro, my brother. And I just, man, the writing is so good. And Jesus is like, what's your name? It's like, Simon. He's like, you're Peter. It's just, again, more, what? So he just calls him a different name. And he's like, no, because there's going to be something new going on for Peter. Like, this is the first interaction we get with him. Right? And Jesus already knows. Jesus already knows that this one is going to be the rock. So they start following Jesus, right? I mean, he hasn't called them his disciples yet, but they start this relationship with Jesus, right? And then at one point, Simon and Andrew's mother gets really sick. And so Jesus goes over to their house. Jesus lays hands on her, rebukes the illness, and she's made well. And then she starts to wait on them, and she's like, oh, back to normal. And it's this incredible miracle. And then there's more, right? And the whole town starts to, they realize, oh, there's a guy healing at, house number 8, and we're going to go over there. And so the whole town goes over there, and people are just lining up at the door, and Jesus is healing them as they go. And it's this huge scene. And Simon, Peter, is like these are his interactions with Jesus. Okay, so that's a little bit of background. So we know a lot about Peter in our readings. You know that Peter is he's brash, and he's got a mouth, and he ends up cutting off someone's ear later. And he's just zealous, and he's a little too much. And after this catch of fish, they get to the shore, and Peter drops to his knees, and he says, get away from me. Get away from me. I am a sinful person. She's like, I know. He's like, I'm a sinful person. Get out of here. I don't know why you're so good to me. First you heal my mother-in-law. Then I watch you heal half the town. You give me a name that means rock. I don't know why you keep hanging out with me. I don't know why you are so generous with me, but I'm not worthy, just so you know. I don't deserve this kind of generosity. I'm not straight-laced. I'm unclean. I'm not the example for the children kind of guy. So thanks for the fish, but you should really get out of here before someone sees you with me. And I love how self-aware Peter is. A little too deprecating, but he is self-aware. And it's obvious, Jesus knows who Peter is. And he knows who I am, and he knows who you are. And he calls Peter just the same. First disciple, first pick. With the first pick and the disciple draft. The crazy one. And then Jesus says something that is, I think, kind of sounds strange at the outset. He says, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. From now on, you will catch people. I don't know if you ever have thoughts in yourself that you're like, what good can I do? What would Jesus actually have me do? I'm not a pastor. I just started going to church, or if anybody knew who I really am, probably wouldn't invite me to leadership. Probably wouldn't ask me to do anything. I'm not as worthy as some people might think. But Jesus says, don't be afraid. I know who you are. So what does this all mean? How do we understand this catching of fish, catching of people? What is evangelism? How does that look? How does that work? We have it in our context, present day. We know what that means, and like all of its baggage of connotation, right? There's still good there, but we have a lot of baggage. Well, in this context for Peter, it means Jesus is saying, I want you to share in my work. This is business partner language. And he's calling them to be partners and to take action, to do something. Discipleship isn't just learning. Discipleship is doing. It's taking it in and putting it out. Taking in information and then letting it work itself out in your life, in what you do. Evangelism is about bringing people to God. And not like, I don't want to like overcomplicate or oversimplify that. Bringing people to the heart of God is bringing people to God in his power and in the miracles of God. Caught up in God, in God's love, in his redemption, and in his healing, and to make us well. That was one of Peter's earliest times with Jesus. At his mother-in-law's house, and then half the town is healed. That is very generous of Jesus to do. Spent an entire evening healing all the people who couldn't be healed otherwise. Bringing people to Jesus is bringing them into restoration and to be made well, and to know that they're seen and they're loved and that they matter. Evangelism is also about generosity. For so long, evangelism, man, it's been like telling people what they need. And it hasn't gone super well. Because we haven't done it super well. Like the big C Christian church, right? We just haven't done that well. And then we get muddied in politics, and it's weird. And evangelism is generous. It is just good. It says there is enough. And what doesn't look like enough, there's plenty. This is why Jesus, like the miracles of the bread and the fish, happened 2 times. Because it's like, what? How does it work? It's that generous. And so the first thing Jesus does when he calls disciples, he's like, watch how generous this is going to be. Just see how much fish this is going to be. See how much you're going to be able to share with people. Like, I don't know if Peter and Andrew sold all that. Like, this isn't a prosperity gospel thing. This isn't like, oh, you're going to get this big catch of fish and make all this money. No. This is about sharing in the wealth of God. He's going to have so much fish at the end of the day, he's like, oh, this is going to rot. What are we going to do with this? We're going to have to give it away. Evangelism is joining God in God's restorative work. Like I said, Peter watched all these healings happen in his house. He watched all the ill, the unclean, the ones who were pushed to the edges of society, not fully included, come and be healed. And I know I've shared this before, but in case we need to hear it again, in this culture, in this time, if you're sick, if you're unwell, if you're unclean, you have to stay outside until you're better, right? It is like a health, protocol going on, but there's also like that mess with people psychologically. Like, I'm not well, and I don't belong. And so healing people, it brings them back into community. It says, go live your life where you're supposed to live. So all these people that came in who are healed, Jesus is helping them re-enter society. Jesus was catching people and releasing them out into the lives they should be living. So they pulled up their boats on shore. They left everything, I guess the fish do, and they followed him. That was enough. They left livelihood. It's a reminder that it's following Jesus, it's worth leaving what feels impossible to leave. You are called into whatever circles you run in, the places you belong. To get caught up in the business of catching and inviting and loving and being generous and soaking the world in grace and generosity. To help people be restored and seen and renewed in their lives. And I think this story helps us see that self-awareness is an important requisite. We have to know who we are. And we have to know who we are because if we know who we are, we know how much grace we need. And if we can finally fall on our knees and go, okay, there's enough for me. I believe that you're calling me. And for whatever you see in me, Jesus, okay. Because when we live out of the place where like, man, we are in debt. But made well and made whole and right in Jesus, we know what it's like. When we can lead and live lives out of a place where we know what it feels to like not deserve. It changes how we see people. So 4 ordinary people followed Jesus that day. They have an encounter with Jesus that changes everything. So I'll share with you a few things. It's good to be you. You're the one. I've said this before. You are Jesus' plan. It's you, and it's me. It's us. You are in the hands of a loving Creator who's restoring you too. You are called to join Jesus in his work of reconciling and healing. You are called to join Jesus in his work of restorative work. You are called to join Jesus in living generously. And you're called to leave whatever is your everything behind, so that you can pursue with Jesus the reality of Jesus' kingdom here on earth. Maybe, like Peter, you've had powerful experiences with Jesus in your life. You've seen him at work and in the lives around you, and this has been formative for you. And I know for all of us, we've seen brokenness and inequality and despair and lack and spaces without grace. But now you've pulled up to shore. Believe it or not, your boat is full. And Jesus is extending the invitation to call and follow, to go deeper and to take the next step. Following Jesus as a disciple is active. All the teaching happened on shore, and the miracle happened where it was deep, and it was dark, and it was unknown, and they were tired. Maybe you see yourself like Peter, and you've been at this discipleship and following Jesus for a long time. And you're like, all I've been doing is cleaning nets, mending nets. Why isn't anything different? Maybe you are dealing with disappointment. But Jesus is saying, let's go deeper. Do you trust? Do you trust that there's fish on the other side of this boat? Right beneath you. Church, we are called to go deeper. We are called to go further. We are called just as we are. We can choose a shallow faith. You can stay on shore. We can also go deeper. And Jesus reminds us, this text reminds us to keep mending our nets. Because God is preparing to use you. It may not be in some wildly miraculous way, but we have to do good network to stay faithful and diligent to the things and the people God has already called you to. Stay diligent in your net minding. To the work, and trust that when Jesus calls you deeper, you'll have everything you need. Let me pray. God, who are we that you would call us? We lack. We're indebted to you. But you still call us to yourself and to your work, to know you and to do your good work. And all the things that seem impossible, and all the drudgery of the mundane things of life, all the net minding, the disappointment. The end of the day, I have nothing left. You said, let's go deeper. So give us courage and strength and the wild wherewithal to just say, okay, I trust you. and throw our nets on the other side. In belief in your good and miraculous work, that people will come to know life in you, generosity and restoration in you, and in us. Pray in your name. Amen.